Formula One teams just found the one Monaco rule that could expose everything. The FIA is forcing a mandatory engine mode that makes electric power fade from just 200 km per hour. And the reason is terrifying. The new cars were projected to launch out of the Monaco tunnel at more than 310 km per hour, on a circuit where the walls are close, the braking zone arrives instantly, and one mistake can end a weekend before the driver even has time to save it. So the FIA stepped in. But now the paddock is asking the question nobody can ignore. Did the FIA make Monaco safer, or did it just rewrite the competitive order? Mercedes could lose part of its biggest weapon. Ferrari suddenly gets a race where grip and confidence matter more than raw power. McLaren sees the gap shrink. Red Bull gets a chance that should not exist. And every team now has to race a car that has been deliberately restrained before the battle even begins. This is not just a safety rule. This is a warning shot at the entire new era of Formula One. Because if the fastest cars in the world need special restrictions to survive the sport's most iconic circuit, then Monaco may not expose the drivers. It may expose the rules themselves. Subscribe to the channel. At first, the FIA's decision sounds impossible to argue against. Monaco is narrow. The new cars are faster. The tunnel exit looked too dangerous. So the governing body stepped in and forced every team to use a safer engine mode. That is the clean version. But the clean version is not why the paddock is tense. The paddock is tense because Formula One teams understand something deeper. A safety rule can still change who wins. That is the uncomfortable part. The FIA did not simply slow the cars in a vague way. It forced a mandatory engine mode called REV1, and that mode changes the point where the electric power begins to fade. On most circuits, the electric deployment starts reducing around 290 km per hour. At Monaco, it starts fading at just 200 km per hour. That is the number every team is staring at. 200. For most people, that already sounds incredibly fast. But for a Formula One car, 200 km per hour is not the end of acceleration. It is still part of the push. The car is still building speed. The driver is still expecting the electric system to help carry momentum into the next part of the lap. And now, at Monaco, that help starts disappearing much earlier. That is why teams are not treating this as a small adjustment. Because Formula One performance is not only about how much power a car has. It is about when that power arrives, how long it stays, and how confidently the driver can use it. Change that timing, and you change the car. Maybe not completely, but enough. And at Monaco, enough can decide everything. The new power units have a massive electrical side. The motor generator unit kinetic can deliver 350 kilowatts of power. That sounds like a technical number, but the meaning is simple. It is a huge electric shove. Imagine a runner sprinting down a narrow hallway. The walls are close, the floor is uneven, and the turn ahead is blind. Now imagine someone pushes that runner from behind right as the hallway tightens. On an open road, that push might be helpful. At Monaco, it becomes dangerous. That is what the FIA saw in the simulations. The cars were not just fast. They were fast in places where Monaco gives almost no margin. The tunnel exit was the headline risk. With active aerodynamics opened in straight-line mode, the cars were projected to come out of the tunnel at more than 310 km per hour. That is not just a speed figure. That is a warning. Because the Monaco tunnel is one of the most intense places in the sport. The driver goes into darkness, the car echoes around the walls, the light changes suddenly, and the braking zone arrives almost immediately. There is no wide runoff waiting. There is no comfortable escape. There is a barrier, a breaking point, and a decision that has to be right the first time. So yes, the FIA had a reason. But here is where teams begin to push back. If the full version of these new cars cannot safely run at Monaco, then what does that say about the cars? That is the question beneath the anger. Formula One teams have spent enormous effort building around the new era. More electric power. More energy management. More active systems. More complex performance windows. Every department has chased tiny advantages inside those rules. Then Monaco arrives, and the FIA says, this part must be limited, and that part must be switched off. That does not feel like a normal race weekend. It feels like the sport admitting the future has limits. And when the future has limits, teams start calculating who pays the price. Mercedes could pay heavily. If a car's strength comes from electric punch, smooth deployment, and the ability to keep pulling when others begin to fade, REV1 cuts into that strength early. The advantage may still exist, but it is no longer as clean. And Monaco is exactly the place where a reduced advantage can become a serious problem. Because Monaco does not offer many recovery options. If a Mercedes qualifies behind a Ferrari, it may be faster and still stuck. If a McLaren gets track position, the car behind may have more pace and still go nowhere. If Red Bull finds even a small setup window, the restricted power environment could give it enough to become annoying, and at Monaco, annoying can become dangerous very quickly. That is why this rule matters. It compresses the field. It makes the favorite less comfortable. It turns qualifying into an even bigger pressure event. And it gives rivals something they always want: belief. Belief is dangerous in Formula One. When teams believe a dominant rival can be reached, they stop thinking only about damage limitation. They take bigger swings. They attack qualifying harder. They split strategies. They pressure pit walls. They force the favorite to react. And the moment the favorite reacts, control begins to slip. That is what every team senses before Monaco. The FIA says the rule is about safety. The teams know it is also about competitive opportunity. Ferrari sees that opportunity clearly. Monaco is not a circuit where raw power normally decides everything. It rewards grip, balance, traction, and confidence. It rewards a car that feels calm in slow corners. It rewards a driver who can place the front tire exactly where it needs to go, without flinching near the wall. If power matters less, Ferrari has more reason to believe. If active aerodynamics are banned, the race becomes more about fixed high downforce. If the electric boost fades earlier, the contest shifts toward mechanical confidence. And that is exactly the kind of Monaco story Ferrari wants. But opportunity creates pressure. Because once the rules appear to open a door, failing to walk through it becomes painful. Ferrari cannot simply say Monaco was difficult. Not if the FIA has made the weekend more favorable to the qualities Ferrari needs. Not if Mercedes has lost part of its cleanest advantage. Not if the race has become more about the areas where Ferrari can attack. That is the double edge of this rule. It hurts some teams by reducing strengths. It hurts others by raising expectations. McLaren faces a different version of the same problem. The team may not love the restrictions either. Active aero being banned affects everyone. The forced engine mode affects everyone. No team enjoys losing tools it expected to use. But Formula One is relative. If Mercedes loses more than McLaren, McLaren gains. If the gap shrinks, McLaren becomes a threat. If qualifying becomes tighter, one perfect lap can change the entire weekend. And at Monaco, that is all it takes. A driver does not need to be faster over a full race distance to ruin a rival's Sunday. They need track position. They need clean execution. They need to be close enough at the right moment. That is why McLaren will look at this rule package with both concern and interest. Concern, because restrictions make the car less free. Interest, because restrictions may make Mercedes less untouchable. Red Bull also has reason to watch closely. If the car remains unstable in slow corners, Monaco will punish it. A nervous rear here is not a small weakness. A reluctant front end is not a minor issue. The driver needs total trust, and without it, the lap never fully arrives. But even a difficult Red Bull can benefit if the leading advantage is reduced. Not enough to guarantee victory. Enough to make the race less predictable. And less predictable is exactly what chasing teams want. That is why the entire paddock feels unsettled. Every team has a different reason to worry. Mercedes worries about losing a weapon. Ferrari worries about wasting a chance. McLaren worries about being close, but not close enough. Red Bull worries about whether its car can stay stable where Monaco is most cruel. The midfield worries about traffic, strategy, and qualifying chaos. And all of them know that Rev 1 is not the only restriction. That is the next part of the problem. The FIA also banned active aerodynamics for the entire Monaco weekend. Not just in the race. Not just in one dangerous zone. Completely. No active aero in qualifying. No active aero during the Grand Prix. No straight line mode. No clever wing adjustment to reduce drag where the car might normally gain speed. That decision is massive because active aerodynamics was supposed to be one of the defining features of the new Formula One era. The idea was simple. More grip in corners. Less drag on straights. A car that could adapt to the track as it moved through the lap. But at Monaco, the FIA decided that adaptation created too much risk. So the system is gone. And that turns the engine mode from a single restriction into part of a bigger pattern. First, the electric power fades early. Then, active aero is banned. Then, the override button loses much of its bite because the derating still begins at 200 km per hour. Piece by piece, the fastest tools of the new generation are being restrained. That is why teams are asking the deeper question. Is Monaco the exception, or is this the beginning of a new kind of Formula One? A Formula One where every circuit needs its own version of the car. A Formula One where energy deployment changes depending on risk. A Formula One where advanced systems can be banned when the track becomes too narrow. A Formula One where teams spend years creating performance, only to have that performance reshaped by circuit-specific restrictions. That question is what makes the revolt feel real. Not a revolt of people refusing to race. A revolt of pressure. A revolt of frustration. A revolt of teams realizing that the new era may not be as free as it looked. Because Formula One teams do not only race each other. They race the rulebook. Every design choice is a bet on what the regulations will reward. Every engine map, aerodynamic concept, and energy strategy is built around the belief that performance will be allowed to matter. When the FIA steps in and changes the value of that performance, teams feel it deeply. They are not only losing speed. They are losing certainty. And certainty is priceless at Monaco. A driver needs certainty that the car will respond. An engineer needs certainty that the setup window is real. A strategist needs certainty that track position can be defended. A team principal needs certainty that the weekend will be decided by execution, not by a last-minute change in how the car is allowed to behave. Rev 1 removes certainty. The active aeroban removes more. And Monaco magnifies the rest. Because there is no place on the calendar where small changes become larger than they should. A slight hesitation costs time. A small traffic issue destroys a lap. A tiny setup mistake becomes a race-long problem. A bad qualifying position becomes almost impossible to repair. That is why the teams feel exposed. The FIA has not just limited top speed. It has placed the whole grid inside a narrower performance window, at the narrowest circuit of all. And when the window narrows, the pressure rises. The next question is simple. Who adapts first? Because the team that adapts first may turn this controversy into a weapon. And that is where the paddock revolt becomes even more dangerous.